Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, aye. Mrs. McCaskill. Mrs. McCaskill, aye.
Any senators wishing to vote or change their vote? If not on this, the yeas are 52, the nays are 47. The motion to table is agreed to. The senator from California.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-388 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
S-388, a bill to prohibit members of Congress and the President from receiving pay during government shutdowns.
Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, that the bill be read 3 times and passed, that the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and any statements relating to the matter be placed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
Mr. President, in 1 minute or less, I want to thank you very much for your strong co-sponsorship of this Boxer Casey bill and all my colleagues who went on. I'll put the list into the record. Basically, we're saying that if we fail to keep this government open or we fail to lift the debt ceiling, that we, members of Congress, should not receive our pay. It's pretty straightforward. Now, I want to thank Senator Coburn. He had objected earlier. He backed off of his objection. He stated, and he will make his own case in the record, I ask unanimous consent that his statement be put in the record right after mine.
Without objection.
He is making the case that federal employees like nurses or Superfund cleanup workers or Border Patrol agents never get 1 penny of reimbursement or back pay, and I think that is really, in essence, unfair to put, if we have a government shutdown, on the backs of the middle-class people who don't want to stay home. They want to work. So I'm glad that he is allowing this to move forward. And now we certainly will ask our friends on the other side of the aisle, Speaker Boehner, to take this bill up post-haste, and let's get it going. Let's avoid a shutdown, but let's make it clear to the American people that if there is one, we're going to take our lumps, just like other federal workers will. I hope this will help avert a shutdown. Thank you very, very much, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to set aside the pending business and call up amendment number 124 at the desk.
Without objection, the clerk will report the amendment.
The senator from New Jersey, Mr. Menendez, proposes amendment number 124.
President, I ask unanimous consent that the amendment be considered as read.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very briefly, the goal of patent reform legislation is to incentivize investment in the American economy, create jobs, and allow this great country to continue to win in the global marketplace. The amendment that I am offering here today would do just that. It would incentivize innovation and investment by prioritizing patents that are vital to the American economy and American competitiveness. Let's, in essence, be able to incentivize that innovation by creating that prioritizing. My amendment would allow the Patent Office to prioritize patent applications that are vital to our national interests. Specifically, the amendment says that the Patent Office Director may prioritize the examination of applications for technologies that are important to the national economy or national competitiveness. And examples, although these are only by way of examples, such as green technologies designed to foster renewable energy, clean energy, biofuels, agricultural sustainability, environmental quality, conservation, or energy efficiency. Now, currently, the Patent Office runs a green technology pilot program. An application for green technologies may be fast-tracked, leading to an expedited decision. This fast-track process is reserved for a small number of applications that are vitally important, so it has little to no adverse impact on other patent applications. Currently, the patent process is rather lengthy. Patent decisions regularly take 2 to 3 years for a final decision. Our country is at risk of having vital, new technologies buried in a sea of paperwork at the Patent Office. We want to make sure that patents that are important to our national economy are fast-tracked rather than sidelined. The goal here is to create jobs at home. We have to make sure that the Patent Office has the resources and ability to prioritize patents that do just that, create jobs, incentivize investment, and support innovation. The Patent Office supports this amendment because they need the tools to make sure that this bill reaches its intended goal of improving America's economy. This amendment will create green jobs and support America's transformation to a self-sustaining economy that, among other things, is not reliant on foreign oil. It is vitally important that we do our best to ensure that all Americans have good-paying jobs and that we secure our nation's economic future. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to support this amendment. It codifies an existing successful program at the Patent Office. It is good common sense policy that can help America propel forward in the 21st century. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Observe the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President,
Senator from New Jersey.
I ask unanimous consent that the quorum clause be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I observe the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The senator from New York.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to speak in support of the America Invents Act generally and about the Manager's Amendment specifically. The America Invents Act, also known as the Patent Reform Bill, has been pending for many years and has been the subject of extensive debate, negotiation, and revisions. In its current draft, it does much-needed good to help protect the American innovation economy by updating and modernizing our patent system. The patent system in the U.S. is designed to protect innovation, inventions, and investment. But over the last several decades, the Patent and Trademark Office has become bogged down and overburdened by inefficient process and outdated law. The result is a heavy burden on the innovative work that is the engine of our economy. I want to commend Senator Leahy. He has gone the extra mile for this bill for many years, and I'm proud and glad that he is seeing his work come to fruition as we finally debate the bill on the floor and passage of the bill is in sight. I also want to commend the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Grassley, who worked with him, as well as Senator Kyle, who has taken a leading role on the Republican side, for their hard work in crafting a bill that effectively modernizes the patent system while paying attention to the many and varied demands that different sectors of the economy exert upon it. I'm particularly pleased that the chairman has decided to adopt the Schumer-Kyle amendment on business method patents into the manager's amendment. It's a critical change that this bill finally begins to address the scourge of business method patents that's currently plaguing the financial sector. Business method patents are anathema to the protection that the patent system provides because they apply not to novel products or services, but to abstract and common concepts of how to do business. Often business method patents are issued for practices that have been widespread use in the financial industry for years, such as check imaging or a one-click checkout. Because of the nature of the financial services industry, those practices aren't identifiable by the PTO as prior art, and bad patents are issued. The holders of business method patents then attempt to extract settlements from the banks by suing them in plaintiff-friendly courts and tying them up in years of extremely costly litigation. This is not a small problem. Around 11,000 new patents for patents on business methods are filed every year, and financial patents are being litigated almost 30 times more than patents as a whole. This is not right, it's not fair, and it's taking desperately needed money and economic energy out of the economy and putting it into the hands of a few litigants. So I'm very pleased Congress is going to fight it. The Schumer-Kyle amendment, which was included in the manager's package we just adopted, will allow companies that are the target of one of these frivolous business method patent lawsuits to go back to the PTO and demonstrate with the appropriate prior art that the patent shouldn't have been issued in the first place. That way, bad patents can be knocked out in an efficient administrative proceeding, avoiding costly litigation. One of the most critical elements of this amendment has to do with the stay of litigation while review of the patent is pending at the PTO. The amendment includes a four-factor test for the granting of a stay that places a very heavy thumb on the scale in favor of the stay. Indeed, the test requires the court to ask whether a stay would reduce the burden of litigation on the parties in the court. Since the entire purpose of the transitional program at the PTO is to reduce the burden of litigation, it is nearly impossible to imagine a scenario in which a district court would not issue a stay. In response to concerns that earlier versions of the amendment were too broad, we have modified it so that it is narrowly targeted. We want to make sure to capture the business method patents, which are at the heart of the problem, and avoid any collateral circumstances. In conclusion, I believe the amendment takes an important step in the direction of eliminating the kinds of frivolous lawsuits that the jurisprudence on business methods patents have allowed. I'm very grateful to the chairman and the ranking member and Senator Kyle, and I support the manager's amendment and the America Invents Act as a whole. Finally, I'd like to say a few words about Senator Coburn's proposal on fee diversion. I think his idea, which is incorporated in the managers, makes a lot of sense. That is, to let the PTO keep the fees they charge so that they are self-funded and we don't have to spend taxpayer money to fund them every year. Last year, when we were debating the Wall Street reform bill, Senator Jack Reed and I made a similar proposal for the SEC, which ultimately didn't make it into the final bill. I just wanted to take this time to make a few points about this common-sense proposal. First, for the last 15 years, the SEC hasn't spent a dime of taxpayer money. For 15 years, the SEC has had no impact on the deficit. This is because Congress in 1996 amended the securities law to provide that 100% of the SEC's funding come from registration and filing fees charged by the Commission. Second, even though the SEC collects more in fees every year than it spends, the amount of the SEC's annual budget is determined by Congress, which has continually shortchanged the SEC. The SEC's budget has been in the crosshairs for years, and their funding has been so inadequate that they've been compromised in their ability to pursue their core mission. Third, the budget proposal in the House would continue the shortchanging of the SEC, cutting $40 million from its existing budget at a time when it needs resources more than ever. And finally, a word about the current demands on the SEC. We gave that agency significant new responsibilities under the Dodd-Frank Act, in particular to oversee the previously unregulated derivative markets. That's an enormous undertaking that everybody agrees is necessary after seeing the role that unregulated derivatives play in the financial crisis. In closing, I would strongly suggest to my colleagues that if self-funding makes sense for the PTO, it makes sense for the SEC. I'm not going to call up my amendment now, or my bill now, but I urge my colleagues to support this common-sense proposal that Senator Reed and I are pushing and ensure that it gets a full hearing in the Senate. And, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your time and attention. Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from New York.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, March 2nd, the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.J. Res. 44, the two-week continuing resolution, which was received from the House and is at the desk. That the Senate then proceed to a vote on the passage of H.J. Res. 44 with no intervening action or debate. Further, that the cloture motion on the motion to proceed to calendar number 11 H.R. 359 be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of Senate Resolution 83, which was submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 83, designating March 2nd, 2011 as Read Across America Day.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and any statements relating to the matter be placed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of Senate Resolution 84, a resolution introduced earlier today by Senator Casey.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 84, expressing support for internal rebuilding, resettlement, and reconciliation within Sri Lanka that are necessary to ensure a lasting peace.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I further ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and that any statements related to the measure be printed in the record at the appropriate place.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of Senate Resolution 85, which was introduced earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 85, strongly condemning the gross and systematic violations of human rights in Libya and so forth, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I further ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and that any statements relating to the measure be printed at the appropriate place in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn until 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday, March 2nd, that following the prayer and the pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time for which the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, that following any leader remarks, there be a period of morning business until 11 a.m. with senators permitted to speak therein up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the Republicans controlling the first 30 minutes, the majority controlling the next 30 minutes, and the remaining time until 11 a.m. equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the majority controlling the final half. Further, following morning business, the Senate proceed to the consideration of H.J. Res. 44, the two-week continuing resolution as provided for under the previous order. And finally, upon disposition of the CR, the Senate resume consideration of S-23, the America Invents Act.
Without objection.
Mr. President, senators should expect the first vote of the day to begin at approximately 11 a.m. That vote will be on the passage of the two-week continuing resolution. Additional roll call votes are expected to occur throughout the day in relation to the amendments to the America Invents Act. If there be no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate is now adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.
The Senate today continuing work on a measure aiming to overhaul the nation's patent laws. We expect more work